Level 2. The Mystery of JonBenét Ramsey. Chapter 1. The Illusion of the Perfect House. This story revolves around a remarkably wealthy family known as the Ramseys. They resided in Boulder, a picturesque city located in the state of Colorado. Nestled at the foot of the magnificent Rocky Mountains, Boulder is famous for its breathtaking views. However, during the harsh winter months, the city is constantly blanketed in thick, freezing snow, creating a landscape that is both beautiful and unforgiving. In this affluent neighborhood, the Ramsey family lived in a massive, 4-story Tudor-style mansion. It wasn't just an ordinary house, it was an imposing estate featuring 15 spacious rooms, large vintage windows, and heavy wooden doors. It stood as a clear symbol of their immense wealth and social status. The head of the household was 53-year-old John Ramsey. He was a brilliant and highly successful entrepreneur who had built a lucrative computer software company from the ground up. Because he worked tirelessly, his booming business provided a remarkably luxurious lifestyle for his entire family. His wife, 39-year-old Patsy Ramsey, was a glamorous and elegant woman. In her youth, she had been a celebrated beauty queen, even winning the prestigious title of Miss West Virginia. Patsy adored the spotlight. She loved wearing expensive designer clothing, showing off sparkling jewelry, and hosting extravagant parties in their magnificent home. They had 2 children who were distinctly different from each other. Their 9-year-old son, Burke, was an introverted and quiet boy. Rather than seeking attention, he usually preferred spending his time alone in his room, playing video games or tinkering with computers. On the other hand, their 6-year-old daughter, JonBenét, was entirely different. With her bright blonde hair, captivating eyes, and radiant smile, she looked exactly like a living porcelain doll. Following closely in her mother's footsteps, JonBenét didn't just play typical childhood games, she actively participated in highly competitive children's beauty pageants. For these intense competitions, Patsy would apply heavy professional makeup to the little girl's face and style her bleached blonde hair. JonBenét wore custom-made, glittering outfits and walked in high heels as she sang and danced confidently on massive stages. Having won numerous crowns and medals, she was a local celebrity in her hometown. On the surface, the Ramseys appeared to be the absolute perfect American family. They lived in a winter wonderland, possessed extraordinary wealth, and had 2 flawless children. Everyone who looked at them envied their glamorous life, thinking they had absolutely everything. But this perfection was merely a well-crafted illusion. Sometimes, flawless pictures hide ugly truths, and the most beautiful mansions conceal the darkest, most disturbing secrets behind their heavy, locked doors. Chapter 2. The Last Happy Day. It was late December, specifically December 25th, 1996. For families across the United States, Christmas Day is traditionally a time of joy, gift-giving, and warm celebrations. The Ramsey family began their morning quite early. While the weather outside was bitterly cold and snow continued to fall heavily, the atmosphere inside their massive home was incredibly warm and festive. The children, Burke and JonBenét, eagerly rushed to the living room to discover a towering Christmas tree surrounded by brightly wrapped presents. They spent the entire morning tearing open their gifts. JonBenét received a beautiful new doll, while Burke got various games and toys. Their parents, John and Patsy, happily watched them play while sipping their morning coffee. It felt like an absolutely perfect, peaceful start to the holiday. Later that evening, the family bundled up in thick winter coats and drove to a Christmas dinner hosted by close friends. The party was filled with laughter, delicious food, and cheerful conversations. JonBenét spent hours running around and playing with the other children, thoroughly enjoying the festive spirit. Everything seemed completely normal, and it was a delightful Christmas night for everyone involved. By 9:30 p.m., the party had finally ended, and it was time to head back. The winter night was freezing, and a heavy blanket of snow covered the dark, empty streets of Boulder. The car ride home was quiet. Because she had played so energetically at the party, JonBenét was completely exhausted. She closed her eyes and quickly fell into a deep sleep in the back seat of the warm vehicle.
When they eventually arrived at their imposing house, the little girl was still fast asleep. Her father, John, gently lifted her out of the car and carried her carefully in his arms. He walked upstairs to her bedroom on the second floor. Without even waking her to change her clothes, he laid her softly in bed and covered her with a thick, white blanket. JonBenét never opened her eyes. She was entirely peaceful. Meanwhile, Patsy walked through the house to ensure everything was secure. She checked on Burke, who was already sound asleep in his room, and then glanced at JonBenét. Satisfied that her children were safe and comfortable, John and Patsy finally retired to their master suite for the night. Soon, the massive house fell completely silent and dark. The family was deep in sleep, totally unaware of the looming danger. Outside, the freezing snow continued to fall softly. But inside the chilling shadows of the house, an intruder was already waiting. The illusion of their perfect life was about to shatter, and the long nightmare was just beginning. Chapter 3. The Bizarre Ransom Note. The long, dark night finally came to an end. Early the next morning, on December 26th, the sun slowly began to rise over the freezing city. It was exactly 5:30 a.m. Patsy Ramsey woke up, left her warm bed, and quietly got dressed for the day. The massive house was entirely silent, and everyone else was still fast asleep. Patsy walked out of her master bedroom and headed toward the wooden back stairs. She simply wanted to go down to the kitchen to brew some fresh morning coffee. As she began to walk down the steps, she suddenly stopped in her tracks. She noticed something highly unusual lying on the wooden floor of the staircase. It wasn't just a small, torn scrap of paper. It was an incredibly long, handwritten letter consisting of 2.5 pages. Patsy slowly picked up the mysterious document and began to read the meticulously written words. Almost instantly, her hands started to tremble uncontrollably. Her heart began to race with absolute terror. The letter was allegedly written by a group of unidentified individuals who claimed to be a foreign faction. The terrifying message boldly stated, "Listen carefully to us. We have your daughter, JonBenét. She is safe and unharmed, but you must follow our instructions precisely." The kidnappers were demanding a very specific and bizarre amount of money in exchange for the little girl's life. They wanted exactly $118,000. In most kidnapping cases, criminals typically ask for round numbers, like $100,000 or $500,000. So, why did they demand exactly $118,000? This peculiar detail remains one of the most baffling mysteries of the entire case. Coincidentally, John Ramsey had recently received a Christmas bonus from his successful company. The amount of that private bonus was precisely $118,000. Did the kidnappers somehow know about his confidential financial details? The chilling letter also contained a severe and strict warning. It explicitly stated, "Do not contact the authorities. If you call the police or speak to anyone, your daughter will be executed." However, overwhelmed by sheer panic and maternal instinct, Patsy completely ignored the kidnappers' strict instructions. She dropped the terrifying letter and frantically sprinted up the stairs toward JonBenét's bedroom. When she threw open the door, her absolute worst nightmare became a reality. The white bed was completely empty. Her precious daughter was nowhere to be found. Without a second thought, Patsy desperately ran to the telephone in her room. She woke up her husband and immediately dialed 911, sobbing hysterically into the receiver. Breathless and terrified, she pleaded with the dispatcher, "Please, we need help. Someone has kidnapped my daughter. Send an officer immediately." The peaceful holiday morning was officially over. Now, the frantic police investigation was about to begin. Chapter 4: The Contaminated Crime Scene. Shortly after Patsy's frantic 911 call, the Boulder police arrived at the Ramsey residence. Officers quickly entered the massive house, expecting a standard kidnapping scenario. However, on that freezing morning, the local police made a catastrophic and unforgivable error. Normally, when a serious crime occurs, the absolute first step is to secure the premises. Police officers must immediately lock all the doors and use yellow tape to close off the area. Absolutely no one is allowed to enter, leave, or touch anything inside the house. But shockingly, the Boulder police failed to follow this crucial procedure. They did not seal the house, and they left the doors wide open. Terrified and desperate for support, John and Patsy began calling their closest friends. They pleaded on the phone, "Please come over right away. Our little girl is missing." Within a few hours, the house was completely crowded with people. Police officers, detectives, family friends, and even a victim's advocate were all walking around inside. The frantic friends wandered through the living room, the kitchen, and the hallways. They freely touched the countertops, leaned on the furniture, and walked all over the floors. One well-meaning friend even grabbed a cloth and began wiping down the kitchen surfaces. This chaotic situation was an absolute disaster for the criminal investigation. By allowing people to roam freely, the police lost invaluable clues and potential evidence. Crucial fingerprints, footprints, and DNA were completely destroyed or hopelessly mixed up. Because the scene was so heavily contaminated, finding the truth became almost impossible. As the morning slowly turned into a tense afternoon, the crowded house grew eerily quiet. Everyone sat anxiously near the telephone in the living room. They were desperately waiting for the kidnappers to call and give further instructions regarding the $118,000 ransom. But the hours ticked by, and the telephone remained completely silent. At exactly 1 p.m., a detective approached the exhausted father, John Ramsey. The detective suggested, "John, we are still waiting for the call, but please search the house one more time. Look closely from top to bottom. See if you notice anything unusual or out of place." John stood up, feeling incredibly heavy and deeply worried. He began to walk through the massive house again, checking closets and spare rooms. Eventually, he approached a wooden door that led down to the basement. He opened the door and slowly descended the stairs into the cold, dark underbelly of the house. Completely alone, John was about to make a horrific discovery that would change everything forever. Chapter 5: The Unsolved Mystery. John Ramsey slowly walked down the wooden stairs into the freezing basement. The basement of the massive house was incredibly dark, quiet, and complex. It contained several different areas, including a train room and various storage spaces. John walked toward a sturdy wooden door that led to a small, windowless storage room. He turned the latch, opened the heavy door, and switched on the dim light. As his eyes adjusted to the shadows, he saw something lying on the cold concrete floor. It was a white blanket, deliberately placed in the corner of the small room. His heart pounding in his chest, John walked over and gently pulled the blanket back. Tragically, he found his beautiful daughter, JonBenét, hidden underneath. But she was not sleeping peacefully, and it was far too late to save her. Someone had brutally murdered the innocent little girl inside her own home. Overwhelmed with unimaginable grief, John picked up his lifeless daughter. He carried her upstairs to the crowded living room, crying out in absolute agony. Seeing them, Patsy and the friends in the house began screaming in pure shock. It was a devastating moment that completely shattered their perfect lives forever. However, by moving the body upstairs, John had unknowingly contaminated the crime scene even further. After that horrific day, a massive and highly publicized police investigation began. Detectives and journalists across the country asked the exact same question. Who could possibly murder a 6-year-old beauty queen on Christmas night? Many investigators immediately pointed their fingers at the parents, John and Patsy. They suspected the family because of a highly disturbing piece of evidence found in the house. Police discovered that the bizarre 2.5-page ransom note was written on Patsy's personal notepad. Furthermore, the killer had written it using a black pen that belonged to the Ramseys. Could a mother or father truly commit such an unthinkable crime and write a fake letter? However, other detectives strongly believed that a dangerous intruder was responsible. During their thorough search, police found a broken window in the dark basement. Perhaps a violent stranger had crept through the snow and climbed inside the house while everyone was sleeping. Decades have passed since that tragic winter night in Boulder, Colorado. Extensive DNA tests were conducted, and numerous suspects were questioned over the years. Despite all the modern forensic technology, the police never arrested the killer. The person responsible simply vanished into the freezing snow, leaving no solid answers behind. Today, the tragic death of JonBenét Ramsey remains one of the most famous unsolved mysteries in American history. The absolute truth is still buried deep within the walls of that cold, perfect house in the snow.